Okay, started.
Well, hello everyone. Welcome to our first webinar for 2017. On behalf of Toronto Agile Community, it's myself, Ardita Karai, and Peter Jacques. We're going to be facilitating this webinar today with Gil Broza. So to go quickly, a little bit about what's going on today. So again, welcome from us. I want to add a little bit what Toronto Agile Community is doing. So stay tuned at the end. We're going to talk about some of the events we're talking. I want to introduce Gil, and then we're going to have the presentation. We're going to leave some room for questions to follow up, and then the closing. Before we start, some housekeeping rules. Please make sure that you are in mute. We have set you in mute, but if there is a way you are not in mute, please go on mute because it can help the others to avoid any noises around you. Please use the question box that we're going to have, that you can see on the side, on the tool. That's where you're going to put the questions, and I'm going to be monitoring the questions and bringing those to Gil. We'll answer them as we go, and at the end as we go. In case of any issue, please either try another browser or try the application, not from the browser. Try to download and try the application, or disconnect and connect. So try to figure something out depending on the connection that you have, and join us back. Again, if you have any issues with the audio, check your application, but you can also use the phone if you want a better quality or non-interruption. So let me introduce you a little bit, Gil, our speaker today. Gil is the very first Agile coach that I have met in my life. At that time, I was working at Autodesk, and Gil was hired as a coach to help us, and I didn't even understand what that role was, but that's where I started seeing, oh, this is an interesting role, I like to do this. So although I changed many other roles between then and now, I am now an Agile coach, and I know what Gil was trying to do with us at that time. What you know, and not this side of me, but the other things that you know about Gil is that he is one of the well-known coaches and promoters and leaders of the Agile in our community, in the Toronto community. He has the books that he has written, The Human Side of the Agile and the Agile Mind-set. And you can go to the website on the way to agile.com to get a taste of his approach. He's very focused on the human side of the software development, although without losing the eye on the value and on the business and on the needs of the business. So without too much more from me, I want to pass the word and the slides to Gil. So Gil, I'm going to make you an organizer. Let me know.
All right, can you see?
We can see and we can hear.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you for this wonderful introduction. I had no idea this personal story was coming. Actually, I remember you asked me so many questions during the training at Autodesk. So, you know, that's the making of a coach, right? Asking lots of questions.
I saved the surprise for you.
Well, thank you. Okay, so we have a ton of people on the line, and you know, it just warms my heart that we have, you know, this type of interest, and this is particularly awesome because we all live in the same city, and I've probably actually met a fair number of you, the listeners, in person. To those of you who don't know me, I've been in Agile since 2001, around the time it got the name, actually. I'm really on a mission to make the software development world more effective, humane, and responsible. And I think it is so not there yet. So my work, as you heard, includes training and coaching, writing, speaking, facilitating. So I get to interact with lots of practitioners and managers. Everybody has a different track record with Agile, of course. But they all seem to fall into three distinct groups. The first is those who are new and need help getting started. And the second is those who have started, it's not going well, and they need a makeover. So, if your situation is one of these two, what you'll hear from me today will help you get a better picture of Agile behaviors, helpful behaviors, and also unhelpful ones. The third group I get to interact with a lot. They're quite interesting. They like Agile. They think they understand its philosophy. It's going okay, but it's not great. So they want to be even more Agile, but they don't know what they don't know, naturally. So if this description echoed your experience, this talk is most definitely for you. So let's put this full screen here. The talk has attitudes in the title, and I'd like to put that in context for you. What you see on the screen is the mindset model that I've been writing and speaking a lot about. What it does is it traces the line of thinking between the work that we do and its objectives, and the the visible mechanics of work, the processes, methods, practices, artifacts, all of those things. So the way this works, and I'm going to explain this very briefly so you know where attitudes live. You start with values. So values are what's important to you, what do you care about? And those are particular things, just a few things that constantly command your attention, because this is how you believe you'll succeed. If you're an Agile, it's because you predominantly care about these four things. People come first before process, adaptation or responding to change, frequent value delivery, making the customer happy, and customer collaboration, so discovering the end result together with the customer. Values are not the only thing, there's also beliefs. Beliefs are what you hold to be true. So they're not fact, and they're not about right or wrong. It's about simply what you think is true, and based on that you do everything else. If you're Agile, one of your beliefs is we don't have all the answers up front. Another one is we shouldn't wait with requirements, they'll get stale. Another one is our work is complex, so emergence or evolution are better than planning. None of this is fact. I mean, there's a lot of reason to believe this stuff is true, and it will be situationally like this, and in other situations it will be different, but it's stuff that you need to be cognizant of, because with your values and beliefs, you choose principles. For instance, 3 Agile principles are getting to done, deferring decisions to the last responsible moment, and continuous quality. There's more, right? Collaboration, simplicity, self-organization, and whatnot. Based on your principles, values, and beliefs, you choose the particulars, such as we'll have a demo every 2 weeks. And when we do code reviews, we will look for omissions that nobody else has considered before. Things like that. Attitudes live here. Attitudes live in the belief box. And here's what I mean by that. The beliefs you saw on the screen before are such strong statements that they may direct you toward Agile or away from it. For instance, if you believe that you do not have all the answers up front, then Agile sounds like a good fit. Whereas if you believe that the customer knows what he wants, you can get that out of the customer's head, you can put together a viable plan, the plan will be relevant when you're done, all of those are beliefs, then you're most likely to veer toward waterfall and similar methods. Attitudes don't have that power. Okay, so they're kind of like low-grade beliefs. So if you've chosen Agile, your attitudes will not make or break your Agile, but they can support it or limit it. And all the attitudes that we'll examine in this talk are of the latter kind. They limit agility. So what I want to do for you today is to help you be more Agile through a change in attitudes. And more specifically, we're going to look at holdover attitudes. Those are attitudes that you had in the plan-driven, predictable, waterfall portion of your career. They were appropriate for the situation and the time. They served you well. But in an Agile setting, they're a bit detrimental. Now, here's the thing. They're also tricky. They're quite tricky because they're probably so well ingrained, so habitual, and so common sense that you no longer notice them. And therefore, you probably don't notice the effect that they're having on your performance and on your team's performance. So we're going to review those 10 attitudes, and along the way, I invite you to reflect which ones you have. I want to help you understand their effect on agility and on results, and to give you some agile-minded alternatives. And at the end, if you like what you're hearing, if you want to learn more from me, I'll show you where you can get more of that. And with this, we're going to get started. And the way we're going to start this, well, actually, the way we're going to do the whole thing is sort of like a silent movie. We're going to pretend that we're visiting a team throughout a sprint from start to finish. They're building an HR management system. So it's just a made-up example. The silent movie will show us how they interact. Now, I am going to read out those silent blurbs, so to speak, for the sake of you who are listening but not watching. And here we go. We're starting in iteration planning. So the PO is saying, it's time to work on the payroll analysis feature. So you guys have estimated it at a few weeks of work. How can we decompose it? Legitimate question, right? So they talk and think about it. And then the delivery team is saying, okay, we could start with the results, but then just in text form. So graphs, trends, all of those will have to wait. That's okay. The text form, that will take us about one sprint. Okay, so there's a bit more conversation. The Scrum Master reminds the team, as they should, filling up an iteration with a single large story is quite risky. So maybe you can find an even smaller piece there. At which point the PO comes up and says, I'm sorry, but there's really no value in splitting it any further. I wonder how many of you encounter this this particular attitude playing out, because I see it all the time. And really what's going on here is the fundamental assumption, again, attitude, belief, that if we're to produce a valuable solution, it has to do a whole bunch of stuff. It needs this, and it needs that, and it needs the other thing. So a valuable solution is a large solution. And that is a problem from an Agile standpoint. It's a problem because in Agile, there are certain things, really from the values that we think about before, that really draw our attention, things we care about, we care deeply about. We care about delivering value. We desperately want feedback, so we know that what we're doing is worth doing. And if there is some change to respond to, and that's sort of a given, we want to make the change in course, economical and not to be a lot of drama. But if you have this attitude, all three are impacted. If a solution is large, you delay value, you delay feedback, and you increase the cost of change. Now, why does this attitude even persist? So what you see on the screen are thoughts that people have, stuff that they're saying to themselves or to others. For instance, if the solution is going to include X, well, if we don't do X now, and then once we do get to it, we'll have to refactor or throw out a lot of what we do now. I can think of a single coaching client where this statement was not uttered. Another one, if we don't do X now, we'll never get time for it. Okay? Or the solution will include X anyway. Might as well work on it now, right? And there's another one. There's another thing going through people's heads. Users have expectations, which of course is a true statement. But usually the assumption is, well, they expect the kitchen sink. They expect everything. Well, maybe so. And here's one thing that goes through people's heads that does not actually go out their mouths. It's the thought of, if we only do a couple of things in our solution, that's half-baked work. I don't want to do that. It will reflect badly on me. Which means that for you to produce a large solution is a safe behavior, right? Nobody can fault you for working on everything that the users need, right? But again, it doesn't help us because it delays feedback, delays value, increases cost of change. So what can we do instead? I want to show you 3 alternative thinking patterns that you can choose to apply. One is, consider all your users and stakeholders and customers. They're not all equal. Now, they're not all equal from many perspectives, but they're also not equal from the perspective of what they value, right? In other words, some of those users can be so happy to get something small early. Others might want the big thing later, and that's okay too. So I don't know which users you have, but if you think of, again, the entire landscape of the people who somehow interact with your deliverable, well, maybe you can segment it based on what they value and what they would respond to. A second thinking pattern is the cost of delay. Most Agile teams work with backlogs. So backlogs have items, the items have value. So we usually compare items based on what's more valuable than the other. But value sometimes diminishes the more you wait. So the frame of how much will it cost us to delay something because it ships late helps us balance the naive comparison of value. So if you review what you have and you say, look, we would love for the thing to do A, B, C, D, and E, but you know what? If we delayed A, that would be really costly to us, to the users, whoever. So we have to do A now, but maybe if we delayed B, it's not too bad. So that can give you a frame there. The third one is an alternative to the concept of the MVP, the minimum viable product. My problem with minimum viable product is that no two people interpret the term the same way. And this has created so much grief. Don't even get me started. But the intent is right. The intent of let's not go too far because something might be enough at the beginning. What you're seeing here is a different way of thinking about the same concept. I learned this one from my good friend Henrik Nieberg, and I've been using it with clients now for a while, and it is awesome. The idea is to consider the evolution of your solution, product, feature, what have you, as composed of several stages. You want to get to the earliest testable product first. And when I say testable, it helps us test our assumptions. All the stuff that we're not quite sure about, stuff we're guessing that people will love, the stuff that we think that should be easy to do, and so on. So this is the really where you get your riskiest assumptions ironed out. Once you're past that, you go to your earliest usable product, which is where you put in just enough for the thing to be usable, to actually deliver value. It's not awesome yet. You're not going to get a rush of customers banging down your door for the usable. But it helps you not do too much, which counters the attitude that we've been looking at. And when you're done with that, now you can make it lovable. Now you make it great. Now people will pay willingly. Additionally, you can then do some maintenance and whatnot. It's all good. But if you conceive of the evolution of your product this way, you're less likely to cram a lot into the earlier incarnations of the deliverable. So I found this to be very useful. Okay, back to your team. So if we thought that story was a lot of work, the PO was saying, well, the next 3 items are very important. Can you work on those as well? Okay, legitimate question, right? Team talks about it, and they say, look, even if we split them into sub-stories, there's no way we'll get enough done in the sprint. I'm sure you guys hear this a lot in your teams. And the PO then says, that's fine. Please, just do as much as you can. So if you're already familiar with the pattern I have working in this presentation, you might be surprised why this is the next attitude. Do as much as you can. I mean, doesn't it make sense? Well, it might make some sense, but not so much in Agile. Let me show you what I mean by that. You can think of work as having 3 perspectives. One is the activities, or what I call here the busyness. So it's not a spelling mistake of business. The activities, coding, testing, meeting, planning, tracking, stuff like that. Activities produce outputs. Stories in the done column, defects that you find, deployments that you make. However, the third perspective is really the only one that your customers, users, management really care about. Outcomes, needle moved, performance, KPIs, value delivered, risks reduced, assumptions that you've proven or disproven. This is the stuff that moves the business forward. When we have the attitude, just do as much as you can, really what we're saying is, let's maximize the 2 boxes on the left, maximize the activities, the busyness, so we can get more outputs. And we don't emphasize enough the matter of the outcomes. Now, in the in the silent movie, it was the PO asking the team to work to do as much as they can, but people in the teams work under the same assumptions. And here's the thing. Here's the logic, the line of thinking that goes through their minds. That's what you see here in the thought bubbles. So what's a worker to assume? Let's say the worker is a developer. Okay. Here's one assumption. Someone knowledgeable has done all the necessary thinking about the outcomes and the outputs, right? The PO has thought about the story. Here's the text. Here's the value of it. Looks like it makes sense, right? The other thing that the worker, the developer, is assuming is it's actually not my place to question the outcomes and outputs, right? The PO, that's their role. I'm accountable to doing the activities and producing outputs. I mean, I'm a developer. I'm here to code, right? And test and deliver software. And here's the third assumption. Dividing the work into sprints is not actually going to materially change it, right? If you put these three assumptions together, you get to the obvious conclusion. I'll just work on it until I'm done. And again, nobody can fault me for that. Meaning that if you have team members who are basically making themselves busy, very, very busy, and even POs asking them to be busy, that's safe behavior, right? You can't get in trouble over this. I mean, you did the best you could, right? But that's not really what we're looking for. We need outcomes. It's not obvious that each output leads to the right outcome. So how do we challenge these assumptions? Here are three potential statements that you might try on for size. I mean, I use them with the teams that I coach to see if they can get themselves to believe those statements, because that's one way to uproot that attitude to do as much as you can. Here's the first one. I am part of the group that determines outcomes and outputs, meaning, yes, I'm a developer or any other role. We decide collaboratively, right? I mean, you know that Agile is collaborative, right? But maybe the role siloing isn't helping. So no, I am part of that group. We do this collaboratively. Here's another one. Those sprints, they're opportunities to revisit our decisions based on what we learn, right? So the sprints are not some, silly overheads that we do because, somebody taught us in a course to do that. No, they're an opportunity, right? 2 weeks from now, let's say that's the duration, we will know more. So doesn't it make sense to, just revisit our decisions and potentially change course? Okay, so people will accept that, but here's another one. Maybe that 2 weeks is a good thing. Maybe constraints, such as the time box, or if we don't do that, we do work in progress limits, or we do both. Maybe they actually force us to think deeply and to make smart choices. In other words, whether you have 2 weeks or 1 day, like in the daily Scrum, or 30 minutes if you do Pomodoro or whatever, maybe that's a good thing to have less time because it forces you to make choices. If you have all the time you need because you do as much as you can, then you just do stuff, and if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. So that doesn't help. Okay. If you take these three assumptions together, it actually changes the tenor of planning. To too many companies, Agile planning is an exercise in bean counting. It's an exercise in story points and velocity and hours and basically how much can we extract out of those resources. And I never use that word because that's the thinking. But what if planning really took on a different form and said, given our outcomes and our constraints, time, scope, people, whatever, what's the best thing we can do? By the way, this is how I like to lead daily stand-ups. We have 24 hours. You know what we want to do, like what we want to accomplish. We know our constraints. What's the best thing we can do? I don't do the 3 questions anymore. Same thing with sprint planning. All right. Next, the Scrum Master is looking at the plan and saying, oh, it looks like we have a task here to enhance the service layer. Dave knows all about the service layer, so I guess he'll do the task. Dave, what's your estimate? So this is not an in-person talk, but I wonder if I did see everybody I'm speaking to, and we did a show of hands of whoever encounters this type of question where you ask the specialist, what's your estimate? Well, also assuming the specialist will do it. I would expect to see a lot of hands go up. This happens all the time. And the attitude in question is that tasks should be done by experts or specialists, whatever term you prefer. Again, doesn't this make sense? Well, again, it made sense in a world where efficiency and on time and on budget made sense. In Agile, not as much, because in Agile, when tasks are done by experts, you get consequences. First, you get small consequences. You had silos. Silos are worse. You have a risk of, the lottery number. Some people know this is the bus number, basically how many people need to leave your project for it to, tank. Then if the tasks are done by experts, then that number is lower and lower. You're dependent on one or two people who basically carry everything, all the risky stuff. Experts sometimes have this tunnel vision. They know how to solve stuff. They've always done it this way. That's tunnel vision. And you get the same effect you got in waterfall, where one expert does A and the other expert does B, and the other one does C, like front end, back end, and services, API. And you basically push your integration risk, which everybody knows is a terrible one, you push it to the end. Now, granted, in Agile, the end is closer than it used to be on big projects, but it's still risky. Right? So you're jeopardizing everything you jeopardized before, value, feedback, and change. But when you do this, you also get bigger consequences. Tasks done by expert, my belief is that this is the prime risk for slipping iterations. So those of you who have teams that commit to a bunch of stuff, and at the end of their sprint, no matter how long it is, half of it is done, quarter is, kind of done, maybe, not sure. Another is just started, and so on. Basically, the iteration did not really complete properly, and they just roll stuff naturally into the next iteration. This is the prime reason. The tasks done by experts. Now again, sprints are not just an overhead mechanism. They're meant to give us options. They help us keep our options open. They help us with the change and the delivery and the feedback. So this particular attitude jeopardizes that directly, because really what it means is that at the end of the sprint, your product is just not shippable. You have to wait even more, and so you're not likely to change, and this is how Agile kind of starts resembling waterfall. And of course, there's delays. The experts would in fact do the work the best and the fastest if they only had one thing to do. But our experts have a ton of things to do, so they become bottlenecks, and everything just becomes terrible. One really, really good way to ship late is to have your experts be on top of their expertise to the exclusion of everything else. So what's the Agile response to this? The Agile response, the attitude really, is that the team owns the deliverables, period. Now, there's lots of potential techniques around this. You can do pairing, co-development, swarming. You can stop assigning individual owners to stories. You can note who touched the story last, but that doesn't make that person an owner. You can plan for less. You can cross-train people, increase redundancy, smaller team, fluid roles, blah, blah, blah. But these are merely techniques. These techniques alone, it's like any pursuit of best practices or some such, they're not going to matter. You have to be explicit and deliberate about changing the attitude and say, really, team, program, whatever, from now on, we're not assuming the tasks get picked up by experts. We want to build ourselves differently. We might still have experts, but they're not our only go-to people. Okay, still in iteration planning, delivery team is also looking at some of the technical stuff. They're saying, oh, there's this Jabberwocky framework. We can reuse a lot of it. It's going to need a bit of adaptation, so we need the architect to make those adaptations for us, right? It's a shared framework. We can't do this ourselves. Scrum Master is saying, I get it, but, the architect is booked for 3 other initiatives already, so this will just have to wait to the next iteration. So what you're seeing here, attitude number 4, is we can't do anything about some limiting factor. In this case, the factor is a dependency on a person. Sometimes there's other dependencies, such as we can't do this, we don't have the license, the permission, the hardware, the cloud, the money, the time, whatever, but we can't do anything about it, and that's the point here. I mean, sometimes it's true. There are things you cannot do anything about. But what I see teams assuming a whole lot is that their abilities are more constrained than they really are. And what's my problem with that? My problem with that starts with the problem it creates for the people, which is resignation, learned helplessness, and cynicism. It's like team members thinking, things could be really great if it weren't for blah, blah, blah. So people kind of resign themselves to things are not going to get great around here. And that creates two problems for the business. One is the obvious one of reduced engagement. And you all know about, a ton of research and evidence about engagement leading to business results. Low engagement, lower business results. But the other thing is, people do try to do their best. And so if they have something that they can't deal with, they will try to do something about it so they're good. That's known as local optimization, right? So for instance, in a case like this, the team needs the architect's not available. Let's imagine that one person on the team was close buddies with the architect. He'd say, I'll go talk to him. I'll go talk to him and I'll ask him to make an exception and really help us out with this one because we really need it. And let's say he went to the architect and he leaned on him and the architect said, okay, I got your back, right? It helps the team, but chances are it hurts those 3 other initiatives that the architect was booked for. So the team itself might do better, but the organization as a whole does not. So this is a case of where local optimization hurts global optimization, which unfortunately is often the case. So really, what's going on here? Every situation will be different because there's usually different limiting factors that create this response. But I can tell you that the usual suspect is the organizational structure and how teams are structured. 99% of the Agile teams out there are in companies that looked at Agile and said, hey, we want this. They grafted it onto their existing structure. So if they had a matrix, now they have a matrix and Agile teams. And so it becomes a bit of a mess. And there's always the competition for the people who are in high demand. And there's a competition for, just people to do the work. And the structure doesn't necessarily help. So I can't tell you how to resolve this because it's very situational, but I can tell you what I think are good ideas to tackle this. One, make sure that if you say your team is empowered, they know exactly what they're empowered to do. And what you think they're empowered to do is the same as what they think. Because again, there's often a gap between what the leaders think and what the people actually think. So make those boundaries and the empowerment explicit, very explicit. Another one is to build relationships. Basically what I mean by that is that despite the hierarchy, you want to create relationships with stakeholders, other teams, other POs, and so on, so that you can negotiate win-win solutions. Not to lean on a guy to do you a favor, but to negotiate win-win solutions. So, a company is still a collection of people, despite what the org chart says, and despite calling them resources. And so the idea is to create relationships, to create networks, and then the structure is going to matter less and less, even though it might be formally in place. The next point is on leaders. One of the reasons we have senior leaders is to optimize globally. Not every organization operates that way, because senior leaders sometimes will deal with their own turf. That doesn't help the organization at large. So the idea is to optimize globally. There's a lot around lean thinking that helps there. And the fourth point, that's an interesting one. Anything you might have in your teams where they say, we can't do anything about X, chances are somebody someplace else has solved this. So read books, go online, go to conferences, go to courses, meetups, and whatnot, and talk to people. Chances are you will hear good solutions. So the experience is out there. It hasn't been shared enough, but it's sort of getting there. Okay, so we're done with iteration planning, and now it's sometime during the iteration. The Scrum Master walks up to Tom and says, hey, Tom, what you working on? And Tom is saying, well, I'm refactoring the employee class. It's really hard to work with. So refactoring, it's basically, improving the design so it's easier to work with, but he's not adding value. So the Scrum Master gets a little bit nervous and says, hey, Tom, we've committed to work on several stories in the sprint, so please focus on that. Again, if we did a show of hands, I wonder how many of you would would identify with this one. And this is attitude number 5, guys. We need to keep producing. I hear variants of this everywhere I go. Actually, just yesterday I heard it, and we've committed to schedules. Yeah, well, we need to keep producing. Now, again, holdover attitude. It kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Because you produce, that, keeps you in business. However, there's something going on here. There's a vicious cycle. And the cycle starts if you believe the thing written there at the top, that finished product matters more than anything. I'm going to say that one again. If you believe that finished product matters more than anything, which sounds like a reasonable belief, doesn't it? Then you're going to get into this vicious cycle. The cycle of there's more work than we have people for. Yes, the slide says resources because that's what people tell me. I never use that word. If we have so much work and so few people, we need to keep them busy. So our workers and our managers are not going to have any time or appetite or attention for investments. So small problems will turn into big problems. So work will get harder and slower. It can be technical debt, and it can also be disengagement. And so if work gets harder and slower, it's going to be need for more time and more people, and you don't have that, you're stuck in a vicious cycle. So really, your only way out of this mess is to really break the connection there by saying, you know what, we no longer believe that finished product matters more than anything. That's going to be a hard one. What you need to do, really, is to always keep both your product and your people in good health. And that's an investment. It means that some of the time you spend, and some of the money, naturally, will go to maintaining good health. So just like in your personal lives, you might go to a gym, or buy organic, or work out, or whatever, right? Go to a doctor, preventive medicine, all of that stuff. We're saying the same thing needs to apply in the organization. And let me tell you, too many Agile teams invest a whole lot less in their health than some of the traditional teams, because the traditional teams, everybody had big plans and they looked out months out, and so they could build some time in and kind of get that approved. But now, no. Now we have the hamster wheel of sprints, right? We got to keep producing. So it gets even harder to keep people engaged and working at a sustainable pace, and your product in good technical health, so it's not too much technical debt and so on. That requires investment. It requires really strong leadership that pushes back on just produce. Okay. So the guys are working, and manager comes up and says, guys, I got news for you. You've been telling me how understaffed you were, so meet Alex. We just hired him. He's joining your team today. And yes, that's attitude number 6. The attitude that says only managers decide who's on the team. Again, it's a holdover attitude. This is how we used to do stuff. Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? It's interesting because in Agile, we have this concept of self-organization, right? So you have a team, you empower them to decide, who does what when. But in most companies, they don't have the power to decide on who they are, right? So if the team structure changes, it's usually through some external intervention through management. And what's the problem with that? One problem is the age-old problem. Well, it's 51 years old. Since this model came out, the Tuckman model, we know that if you have a performing team, you change their composition, you add a guy, you take out someone, even temporarily, that knocks them down to storming because they need to adjust. Some teams respond quickly, some teams totally tank. So there's that. The other is the matter of ownership, right? If I spend 8-9 hours a day at work and I sort of tie my fate to my colleagues, and everybody tells us, look, you own the stuff, it's yours, it's the code is yours, the plan is yours, it's all yours. But if we decide to yank one of you out, you don't get to say. That's very disempowering. So that takes some of the ownership away. It also takes away the happiness. I'm of the belief, which is very much, aligned with the Agile thinking, that, you start with happy people, that gets you to happy business, which in turn gets you to happy customers. I think it's important to keep people happy. And if managers kind of force a marriage on a team by putting people in there that they never asked for, I can't see how that is likely to make anybody happy unless it's accidental. So what can you do instead? What you have here on the left, self-selection. Many companies have been practicing with this for the last 3 years. There's a book out on how to do that. I have myself facilitated self-selection several times, where essentially you have a large pool of people, starting from 20, and they decide who goes into which team. I've facilitated self-selection for an Agile leadership team. There's lots of ways to do this, lots of potential targets for self-selection, but it's very important that it's the people deciding and not somebody else deciding on their behalf. What you see on the right is not a new invention, right? Involve the team that the candidate is likely to get into. Whether it's a new one or a transfer, doesn't matter, but have the team interview the candidate. But here's the thing that we do more of these days. We give the team veto power. So a team might interview a very promising candidate and then go to the manager and say, thank you, but not here. This person can work excellently in another part of the company, or maybe not at all, but we don't want them. That is huge empowerment. So the manager will still do a lot of the legwork, some of the interviewing, the job description gets done collaboratively, things like that, and the team can say no. That's very powerful. It's actually very easy to do. Okay, our next stop is the stand-up meeting. So it's Jen's turn, and she's saying, well, I worked on the back-end piece for the taxable benefit story. My part's done. Again, if we did a show of hands here, I'm sure you hear something like this almost on a daily basis. One person saying, I did this, I'm finished. I am finished. And there is attitude number 7. Everybody should focus on their part. So everybody has a part. Now, people don't call it parts, they call it plates. It's stuff on my plate. So everybody should focus on this. What's the problem with that one? The problem with that one is when we pigeonhole, when we silo people, they focus on their own little thing. That is not an outcome, ever. It's just busyness and outputs. So we're back in the earlier problems again. Why does this persist? Again, thought bubbles here of what people tell themselves or what they tell others. We have accountabilities here. I answer to the dev manager. Yeah, I know it's not agile, but I answer to the dev manager. He or she has expectations. Well, the expectations are to do my thing, right? Or another one, and people say that stuff, collaboration. Yeah, sounds good, but geez, it's expensive. I had a CEO tell me once, years ago, his teams were doing pair programming, and he called me in one day and he said, Gil, why am I paying 2 people for the job of 1? And people still ask that. They still think that collaboration is expensive and not really necessary because, everybody should be able to do their own thing. I mean, we hire them this way, right? And subsequently, they also think, well, if somebody came over to work with me, I don't need the help. So they don't think of it as, finishing work together. They think of it as help, and they don't want help, or they can't appear to need help, right? So this is what goes on through people's heads. The helpful attitude in Agile is this. Your users want your product to make their lives better. The way to do this is when everyone takes responsibility for the end product. I want to say this one again. When everyone takes responsibility for the end product, the users benefit and the producers benefit. The key shift here is shifting from individual accountabilities to end product, because that's the only thing that really matters to your consumers. Okay, so we're still in the stand-up, and Dan is saying, Scrum Master, I'm a free resource now. What should I work on next? This is actually a quote from a stand-up I observed a few years ago at a company that was actually pretty agile. I was shocked when a person referred to himself as a resource. Never mind. I know it's my pet peeve. But what's the attitude here? The attitude is that someone else determines what I work on. Again, holdover attitude, right? Traditionally, we knew where our work came from. We had a boss, right? We had the boss's boss, and so on. In Agile, we have lots of perceived authorities. We have the PO, we have Scrum Master, Manager, Tech Lead, the business. People still use that term. Steerco, sponsor, lots of perceived authorities. Now, here's the thing. Agile organizations are not flat. Okay, we still have positional authority and things like that. But it turns out that you get a lot of the Agile benefit if you work despite the hierarchy or despite the authority. If instead you work through influence and communication and networks and people, relationships. So I wouldn't come in and tell you, to fire all your managers, because that's just not Agile. Of course, that would be silly. But the important thing is to make sure that decisions get made in a way that supports the business, right? So we talked about global optimization versus local optimization, and all of that stuff. It's still true. And again, this is very situational, so I can't give you specific guidance here, but I do want to give you 3 things that you can consider. One is, take stock of how decisions do get made in the wider community. So maybe you have an Agile team that makes decisions with consensus, but how does the PO know what to work on? Right? Is the PO really making those decisions, or is the PO mouthpiece for somebody else, who in turn is the mouthpiece for somebody else? There's lots of examples there. Here's another one. 2 Agile principles are collaboration and consensus. Who is nervous about that? Right? Because really what we do is with Agile, people lose some power. Presumably it's for the greater good, and it also turns out to be personally good in many cases, but that makes a lot of people nervous, right? So there could be some people who are holding this back for you. And lastly, take a look at which mechanisms reward collaboration and which mechanisms discourage it. Okay, there's a ton of work and knowledge behind this. I don't have the time to get into this, but look for the mechanisms. Okay, it's the end of the sprint. It's the review meeting, and the PO is saying, "Oh, good to see you guys." So, are you guys ready with the done with the payroll analysis story? So Abby's answering, "It's done. It's done. The QA just needs to test it." Now, before I show you the attitude, let me show you what else Abby could have said that belongs under that attitude. It still needs refactoring, but it works. We just need to finish the documentation. The rest is easy. We have it working on Chrome. Or we just need to merge the code into the main line. So I hear those all the time, as you can imagine. And the attitude is really that of, it's done. Well, almost. What's the problem there? There are actually a couple of situations, and one of them is okay, like that picture with the elevator. If what you or your team has done is to produce enough of a deliverable to make some users happy or get useful feedback, that's okay. The picture there with the elevator, this elevator was in a building where I had a client, and the elevator was out of service for upgrade for weeks. And you know what type of mess that creates. There weren't too many elevators to begin with. So they brought it into service, and they didn't say that they were done. They call it substantially incomplete, whatever that is. The carpet looks terrible, right? But if I'm the user, I could care less about the carpet. I want the elevator, so I'm not just stuck downstairs waiting. But here are 2 situations that are not okay with the done almost. One is when you rush, cut corners, and produce cruft. Like, there's a demo coming up, we got to finish this, guys. And another one is when you do the heavy lifting and other people kind of close for you, right? The problem with these attitudes is that they hurt teamwork because they communicate that some people are more important than others, or some people just won't bother with some things. And the other is hurting productivity, because anything that is not done now will have to be managed later with higher overhead and longer feedback loops and more waste. That's why Agile teams define done and try to live up to their definition of done. In my experience, most definitions of done are partial, and they leave a lot out. The one prime thing that they leave out is that developers would not be embarrassed to ship the thing. Most definitions of done just talk about customer acceptance and tests and bugs, but not about the quality of construction. So that's something for a different day. What can you do? If you want to counter that attitude, here are some things you can do. You can plan for less. A lot of people plan for way too much, especially because they do the velocity counts, and those are kind of shaky. As you do the work, focus. Stop the multitasking that has to do with limiting work in progress. Define done meaningfully, like I just said. And also, again, everybody takes responsibility for the end product. Finishing does matter more than starting. And it's our last stop, the retrospective. The Scrum Master is looking at the card and saying, team, several cards here state that our deadline is impossible, so how do you suggest we tackle this? To which Dad says, dude, you've raised that point with management how many times? Forget it. They'll never listen to us. Attitude number 10 is the forget it because of management. This is the one attitude here that's not entirely a holdover, but I hear it all the time. I hear it all the time quite often because teams get trained, management does not. So I'm happy to say that I get to train directors and VPs regularly now, but still a drop in the bucket. The attitude that we're trying to do stuff here, we're trying to be agile, but management will never allow it. Management will never get it. Management will never change. This matters. It matters if this attitude is false, if people are assuming this and it's actually false, but it also matters if they assume it and it's true. Because really, your organization's agility is bounded by its culture and by its management system, how we get stuff done around here. So that's what you need to work on. That can be daunting. It usually takes a bunch of people, right? It's not something you do alone. Changing culture is hard. It's possible, but it's hard. You need allies, you need counsel, you need a lot of things. But sometimes you can make changes even with the smallest things. I don't remember where I took this picture. I really have no clue. But it's nice how they communicate culture here. The poster just says, it's okay to, whatever it is, make mistakes, not check your email out of hours, go somewhere else to concentrate, have a messy desk, forget things, and so on. So really what they're doing here is they're communicating culture. They're establishing culture by basically saying, it's okay. Here's permission to be human, to be you. That does a lot for changing culture. So here's a quick recap of the 10 attitudes. A valuable solution is a large solution. Do as much as you can, and along the way tasks get done by experts. We can't do anything about this limiting factor. We need to keep producing. Only managers decide who's on the team. Everyone should focus on their part. Someone else determines what I work on. It's done. Well, almost. And the thing about management. So I want to give you a word of caution. Everything we looked at today, attitudes in general, they come from identity, character, values, history, fears, needs, habits. It's all the stuff that makes us human. So if you ever look for best practices, forget it. There's no best practice here. What will help you is caring and curiosity and empathy and kindness. This is the essence of good leadership. This is what creates healthy organizations, not the practices. Yeah. So, as I promised at the beginning, if you like what I have to share and you'd like to learn more from me, here are your options. There are the 2 books. The blue one explains how to lead Agile teams to greatness. The purple one explains the Agile approach without using the word Scrum. Basically explains how we make choices and what it is to be Agile, and not which practice to do and what's best and what not. There's also a free 20-day program on the way to agile.com, in which you get a short daily email with answers to challenges that everybody seems to have with Agile. The other thing, what you see there on the top, that one is time sensitive. It's happening in 3 months. 4 years ago, Johanna Rothman and I started leading an annual event that we call the Influential Agile Leader. It is for people who are personally driven to make Agile work in their company. But their actual effect on the transformation is not where they'd like it to be. So it's not really a matter of authority or tools or practices or change management. It's about understanding intervention points and necessary conditions, how to influence effectively and how to bring people along. So we've combined our ideas, tools, and approaches into an experience that will help you be more influential. It's an event with awesome energy, and it's only the 2nd time we're ever doing it in Toronto. So I invite you to take a look at it. The URL is there, bit.ly/Agile Leader. It has to be lowercase. In appreciation for attending this webinar, I'm glad to offer you 15% off with this coupon code, TACW17. If it's a fit for you, please don't wait. It's 3 months away, but it's already half full. We usually sell out. So that's what I have for you, and I'm happy to take questions. Artie.
Thank you, Gil. Yes, we do have some questions lined up. I'm going to give a little bit time since we're running a little short. So the first question is, what if a Scrum Master is trying to coach the team on these attitude, yet the management, although it is coached on Agile attitude, still thinks the traditional way and prevent the Scrum Master from doing his or her job?
Yes, so coaching the team is not so much the issue there, is it? I would work with the management and the way, so it's not just, plain old coaching, it's what you pay attention to. And what I like to pay attention to when I coach managers is, again, on values and beliefs, because those are things that we normally do not make explicit. For instance, we need on time and on budget. Okay, but Agile wants adaptive. Which one do you prefer? Because they are potentially in contradiction. So which one do you prefer? And this is a tough conversation to have. But you need to do it with empathy and with patience, and you need to do it several times over and with different people. Because if you want Agile to work, then you have to adjust your value system. The mechanics alone won't matter at all. You can do your scrums and dailies and demos until you're blue in the face, but if the value system doesn't change, forget it. So that's the thing to work on. Showing some intermediate successes is good, but it's not enough.
Related to that is also something else that relates to the mindset 6, to attitude 6, where we say that the manager does not make all the choices. What if you have a new team or team in conflict? How could you get them to make a decision collectively to bring in a new team member?
Look, I think that most teams, pretty much all of them, need a leader who's a good servant leader. Presumably that's a Scrum Master, ATL, coach, and whatnot. Or a manager could do that. So if a team is in conflict, what is the manager doing to address that? Now, if a team is in storming, it really means that there's at least one person who hasn't made the individual decision that they actually want to work with these people. And that's a very important point. It's not a matter of just give them time. It's a matter of working on, do we agree to work together? So throwing new people into the mix might help, or it might hinder. There's no magic pill here.
And the last question is, how would you sell to a manager the fact that in an Agile team, one cannot add or remove people because the team might have some downtime or is overloaded at one point in time?
So I'm curious about the word sell there. I'm not good at selling, but I want to have a conversation. And quite often when managers want to add people and whatnot, they're trying to satisfy some goal. It might be personal, it might be organizational. I need to understand what's going on there. And only when we understand what they're trying to accomplish, then we can talk about pros and cons. It's not just about saying, well, in Agile you don't do that. That's not a good way to have any conversation, right? So it's about the effect. And one way to reduce the drop in productivity due to storming is if the change is agreed to by the team or if it's voluntary. Okay, so if they agree to it, that's sort of okay. It doesn't make the drop too bad. But yeah, everything I do, I never say, it's like this in Agile, this is it. No, it's not it. It's all a choice. Everything is a choice. Even those 4 values are a choice. I mean, sometimes I will want to have those as values. Other times, I want to just get it right the first time and be on time and on budget and have my standardized process because that's the right thing to do. So all the conversations come back to that. They have to come back to that. Otherwise, it's just a non-starter.
Okay. Well, those were the questions. I'm gonna now share the last things we have. I'm sharing my screen. Everyone can see my screen, I hope. So, Gil, thank you very much for your time and for all your wise information and tips and tricks and experience you shared with us. I wanted to close this webinar by showing a little bit all of the sponsors that have helped Toronto Agile community to achieve this event and other events. Also, want to remind you to stay tuned. Very soon, we're gonna be communicating with you. The open space is coming up soon, so if you don't want to miss one of the best events in our Toronto GTA community, you want to hear what's going on. So go to our website, give us feedback, give us suggestions for new topics in the future. Follow us on Twitter or newsletter, subscribe to us, and thank you again, Gil, and everyone have a great day.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.